Hey guys, Spence here, doing another Way Forward game, this time with Shantae, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye! Woo! Nailed it.
Shantae and the Pirate's Curse.
So, Shantae. This series has been around for a surprisingly long time, with the first game having come out in the Game Boy Color in 2002, and then re-emerged back in 2010, and then had a more recent game in 2014, and with another one on the way. The series follows Shantae, a half-genie girl charged with protecting Scuttletown, namely from the series' antagonist Risky Boots. In the previous games, the main mechanic of Shantae was that she could change form into different animals. This game, the third in the series, changes that up a bit. So, what's going on in Shantae and the Pirate's Curse? Evil never rests, at least not permanently. A being called the Pirate Master is attempting to resurrect himself. He was so powerful that it took all the genies in the world to stop him the first time around. While trying to resurrect himself, he caused all the minions under Risky Boots' command to basically turncoat and take all of her stuff. Because of this, Miss Boots approaches Shantae, who after their last confrontation has lost all of her genie powers, and the two make an alliance in an attempt to stop the Pirate Master. The main plot is alright, but it's really the character interactions and dialogue that's the main strength of the narrative, which works well with Shantae's quirky style, though admittedly that quirky style can be a bit all over the place. Sometimes it's vulgar, a lot of times it's vanilla, other times it's downright morbid, and occasionally it's pretty meta. Just ask the Squid Baron. So while your long run goals won't change and there aren't too many meaningful plot twists, you won't usually know what you're going to run into until you encounter it. Now, I would not describe this game as a Metroidvania, mainly because you're bouncing between different maps and locations. I would describe it more as a side-scrolling Legend of Zelda, though nothing like Legend of Zelda 2. It being a side-scrolling platformer, Shantae's moves are pretty darn normal when you start the game. You can jump, duck, crawl, and attack with your hair, which will be your primary means of offense. So for the first hour of the game, expect a lot of jumping and head whipping. The main goal of the game is to go to the different islands and find the different dens of evil within them. The thing is, getting to the islands isn't the hard part. Actually reaching the den of evil is where most of the challenge will come into play. A lot of the time, you'll find yourself going to the island and then leaving to go back to Scuttletown or back to one of the previous islands you're on to either find an item to help you move forward or to be told where you should be jumping and head whipping to next. Then when you do reach the Den of Evil, expect these things to come straight from Legend of Zelda. We're talking a lot of locked doors and pathways you can't go down and the one route you can't go down and finding the key for that and opening a locked door and finding a piece of equipment that will help you proceed forward, which leads us to the main mechanic of the game. While Shantae is unable to shapeshift for this adventure, she will instead, in the Den of Evils, find various bits of Risky's equipment. These things include like Risky's gun, her sword, or her cannonball, which will give Shantae new abilities, such as using the gun to shoot, using the sword to jump on enemies Scrooge McDuck style, or use the cannonball to give her a triple jump. And then of course at the end you fight a boss. Now the gameplay, in my opinion, it's okay. The thing is, a lot of stuff I've been talking about up until this point, if you played any of the Legend of Zeldas, Metroids, or other games like Lock of Melee, Dust, and Elysian Tale, or games like these, there's a good chance that the stuff I've been talking about is stuff you've already done before. And whether this game appeals to you or not will really depend on if you're tired of this style of gameplay, because Shantae and the Pirate's Curse does not add anything new to the formula. Then, outside of your main quests, there really isn't much to do, outside of hunting for heart squids, which collect 4, get a heart piece, haha, and collecting all the dark magic from the mutated Tinkerbats. Other than that, you could do requests for the mayor, but you're just getting some extra gems if you're really strapped for cash. It isn't that the game doesn't attempt to be varied, it just tries to with set-piece situations. One point you had to run through a forest while avoiding all the obstacles, another time you had to go through a stealth sequence that would have worked better if they actually explained the stealth mechanics of it, but I digress. But these things are small excursions on your bigger adventure, which will consist of a lot of back and forth and jumping and head whipping a lot of the time, with or without the pirate gear. Speaking of the pirate equipment, I really think they were misused here, mainly because their damage output is so low that they're only really useful for their puzzles, so whenever you encounter enemies, chances are you'll dispatch them with jumping and head whipping. I mean, there are a few outlier cases where there are some enemies that you're pretty much meant to defeat with pirate equipment, or the bosses, but these cases are way too far in between, so you're just better off going Melina Rage on them. I mean, they could have gave you an energy bar and increased the damage output and have it work like that, though in some scenarios I can see why they would do that. That being said, the pirate gear is very lackluster. The main thing I'm trying to say is that the game is surprisingly repetitive. The platforming is definitely solid, and the different environments definitely help with how they can incorporate enemies, but it's still a lot of jumping and head whipping. For your average first time playthrough, it will probably run you 7 to 9 hours, depending on how expedient you are about things, and beating the game will give you pirate mode, which is the normal mode, but now starting with all the pirate equipment. Oh, also you can change the wallpaper on your main menu. Okay. Presentation-wise, it's a sprite-based game. What more do you... Okay, I know I can't get away with just saying that. The world of Shantae is very well designed visually. Every character, be them a small enemy, an insignificant NPC, or a large character, are animated, and it helps to make the game feel a lot more energetic and lively. Also, the locales are very well designed, with their varying color palettes and varying types of detail going on in their backgrounds. Admittedly, there are a few areas where you can see that an asset was just recolored, like trees for example, but visually the game does look nice. Audio-wise, we got another soundtrack from Jake Kaufman, and in my opinion, it's not his best work. It's not like any of the tracks are particularly bad, it's just they feel kind of forgettable, and the few tracks that I do like, there's only really parts of them that I like. In the end, the soundtrack is okay, but I imagine there'll only be a few tracks you want to give a second listen to. The only nitpick I have against the presentation is the fact that menus look very blank and sterile compared to everything else in the game, which has a lot of detail and things going on with them. They're not adding anything visually, and they just stand out when you compare them side by side. And that's Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. Would I recommend this game? No, and definitely not for $20. Outside of the dialogue and aesthetic choices, it is an adequate game. For me, the game felt really repetitive, mainly because it didn't push in a particular direction. It didn't want to focus on combat, so combat's really simple and you do the same thing most of the time. It didn't want to focus on objectives, so there's only really your main quest to attend to. Didn't want to focus on exploration, so there aren't that many places to go. But my biggest issue with the game is how it takes aspects from older games and doesn't do anything with them, as if it has them for genre's sake. And because of that, it just makes the game another retro platformer, with bigger than usual maps, and a large amount of jumping and head whipping. In short, a game that looks nice that can't meet the expectations of its own price tag, and because it can't overcome its own heritage, you probably played it before, but with various other names. It's definitely worth a Steam sale, but don't expect anything new from this. Hello again, thanks for watching. If you happen to like this sort of content, drop a like, comment, subscribe, and maybe tell a friend who'd also be interested in this sort of content. In the meantime, if you want to look at a side-scroller that's a bit different in how you attack enemies, I recommend looking at my Gunvolt video, which the PC port, by the way, has addressed all the major issues I had with the game, so that's neat. On the other hand, if sprites aren't retro enough for you, I recommend looking at my Ninja Gaiden Shadow video, my favorite retro video that I did, of course.